Foreign-born workers have always played a substantial role in the American economy. In 2019, there were 28.4 million migrant workers in the U.S. labor force, accounting for over 17% of the total labor force.
So in the last 3 decades, half of the increase in labor force in the United States has been because of immigrants and their children. The second statistic is in the next 3 decades, almost all of the increase in labor force would be because of immigration.
However, President Trump's immigration policy has set limits to the number of both legal and illegal workers in the United States. On June 22nd, President Trump signed an executive order suspending the entry of certain types of temporary foreign workers into the U.S. until 2021.
They're going to press pause on a lot of these visas for foreign workers coming into the United States because of the high unemployment rate in the United States. They say, senior administration officials saying they want to see an America First economic recovery that starts with Americans.
Big tech companies, Apple, Alphabet, Amazon, Microsoft, use H-1B visas. Analysts say any restriction or increase in salary requirements could result in big tech sending more jobs offshore.
However, activists who support less immigration feel it's a win for American workers.
Voters are seeing that President Trump is taking action on an issue they care about, which is making sure that our immigration system does not disadvantage Americans.
So how does banning work visas impact the U.S. economy? On April 21st, President Trump first announced a 60-day pause on the issuance of new green cards. It specifically included potential immigrant workers and relatives of green card holders in an effort to limit competition for jobs in the United States during the coronavirus recession.
By pausing immigration, we'll help put unemployed Americans first in line for jobs as America reopens. So important.
After record-breaking jobs increases in May and June, President Trump extended the April proclamation until the end of the year on June 22nd, reporting that the proclamation freed up roughly 50,000 jobs for American citizens. Along with the extension, the Trump administration also expanded the order to include non-immigrants, signing an executive order to freeze 5 work-related visa categories until December 31st. The 5 targeted visas include the H-1B visa for workers in highly specialized occupations, the H-4 visa for spouses or children of H-1B holders, the H-2B visa for non-agricultural low-skilled workers, the J-1 visa for work and student exchanges, and the L-1 visa for intra-company transfers. A new revision to the proclamation on July 16th, however, allows dependent family members to apply for a visa as long as the primary visa holder currently resides within the United States.
There are a couple of reasons why those particular categories were selected for the suspension. One is because these are the largest guest worker programs that we have. And the other reason is that these are some of the most problematic in terms of both fraud and also displacement of U.S. workers.
The order also specifically applies to visa applicants from abroad, while those currently within the United States can still apply for any temporary work visas.
The Supreme Court has said that the president has the power to limit entries into the United States because that is listed clearly in the Constitution. But, for Trump to stop immigration within the United States, those work status for a green card from being approved from within the United States, that can be easily seen as overstepping his power.
I think the president was looking for a balance between wanting to make sure that there are opportunities for Americans and legal immigrants who have already come, and not stressing our labor market at this particular time, and also recognizing that it could be disruptive to employers who have already hired and trained these workers who are here today.
A lot of people who enter the U.S. do so without a visa, through the waiver program with 38 partner countries and Taiwan, which allows travel to the U.S. for up to 90 days. However, any foreign citizen who does not apply through that program or wishes to stay longer must obtain a visa that's appropriate for their situation. There are almost 216 different types of visas offered in the United States. They're separated into 2 main categories: immigrant visas and non-immigrant visas.
So non-immigrant visas are generally temporary in nature. So that means you're at some point going to leave the United States. But immigrant visa means you're coming to stay.
All non-immigrant workers seeking employment in the US must first obtain a temporary work visa that allows them to stay in the country for a fixed period of time.
Many of the permanent immigrants are also, they first came here as temporary immigrants. So temporary immigrants are the primary source for permanent immigration, and that in the long term, you'll also see temporary immigrants becoming a much bigger source of labor force in the US economy.
Temporary work visas have long been the subject of scrutiny under the Trump administration and those who support reducing immigration into the US.
The problem is that our existing temporary work visa programs and even the permanent green card programs are not bringing in necessarily uniquely qualified, best in the brightest type workers, that they are bringing in workers who have worked for companies that were able to bypass American workers and exploit the visa system to enhance their own profits.
Alternatively, immigration advocates suggest that temporary work visas are working exactly as it should.
The studies show that in the first 10 years of their arrival, 30% of foreigners actually leave. And among temporary workers, a much larger proportion leave. Those who do well, those who assimilate well, stay here. Those who don't do well, go back. And that's the kind of system we really want.
The ban on temporary work visas will have a significant impact on the American economy.
Temporary immigrants may not be more than 2 or 3% of the labor force, but they are critical in many sectors. And if temporary workers are a source for permanent immigration, that permanent immigration would be affected.
The Economic Policy Institute also predicts that the extended April proclamation will reduce the number of immigrants receiving green cards by nearly a third compared to those received in 2019. Although foreign-born workers only account for 17.4% of the total workforce, pro-immigration experts argue that they play a vital role in the American economy, working in jobs that Americans are not willing to do or just aren't capable of performing.
Immigrants do not displace native workers. They replace native workers in the sense that, for instance, in the agriculture sector, a lot of those jobs natives are not willing to take. And it's not just the agriculture sector, but also in many high-skilled professions also. For instance, doctors. They are about 30% of all doctors in the US are foreign-born.
Those that advocate for less immigration suggest otherwise.
No, there is no such thing as a job an American won't do, particularly in this pandemic shutdown when we have tens of millions of Americans who have either temporarily or permanently lost their job, and we're looking at something like at least 10% unemployment. You really can't make the case that there aren't Americans available to do these jobs at this particular time.
Bans on some visa types are also expected to impact certain sectors more than others. For instance, the ban on H-1B will likely have a detrimental impact on the tech sector that relies heavily on foreign talent.
The tech industry is one of the most prolific users of the guest workers. There are tech companies that have built an entire business model as staffing companies on bringing in workers from abroad to offer at cheaper rates to do what is really entry-level or more routine work, not requiring any special skills, but being able to provide these workers at lower cost.
Despite its intention to save more jobs for the American people, some experts argue that the ban could do more harm than good, citing a positive correlation between immigration and economic growth.
Temporary workers are a very tiny component of the US labor force. I don't think it's more than 3%. I think maybe 2% at the most are temporary workers. And then they are critically in certain industries. They are not a huge component of all the industries. And then these workers themselves create a lot of jobs.
Immigrants also pay more than $90 billion in taxes every year, while receiving only $5 billion in welfare, according to the ACLU. Experts also believe that blocking immigration could also allow other countries to gain a competitive edge in the global market.
The best and the brightest from all over the world come here, have historically come here to the United States, and that's to our benefit, right? Because they come here, they get a degree, and many stay, and they're the ones that start the tech companies and other companies that drive economic growth going forward. And if they don't come here in the wake of this crisis, if they're scared to come here, then we're just not going to have. They're going to be starting those companies in the countries from which they came and not here in the U.S.
If immigrants are not allowed to work here, or if temporary workers are not allowed to come to the U.S., companies will move to Canada so that they can bring these temporary workers to Canada. So America's loss would be Canada's gain. In the short term, in the long term, these companies might move to China, or the workers might decide to China, where there's a lot of high-tech work is going on. So America's loss would then be China's gain.